Welcome to the orthoPAC podcast with your hosts Sam Dyer, Chuck Dowell, and Miles Gilbreth. Please join us as we attempt to fill in the gaps between education, current events, and real-world practice. Listeners, this is Kristin Burton, a PA who has expertise in finance and retirement and savings and investing. Kristin, thanks for being on today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
Miles is, I would say, earlier in his career. Chuck's kind of grinding it out right in the middle of it, and I'm at the other end. So we're coming at this from different perspectives.
Yeah.
How about student updates? I was just hoping you might provide listeners some updates on student debt, especially with the current environment that we're in with federal funding. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will say the last year has been incredibly tricky for federal borrowers. You really have to stay in the know. And honestly, it's become almost a second job, just figuring out what in the world is going on with student loan debt. And there's a lot of misinformation. So as I'm sure you guys are aware, there was an injunction on the SAVE plan. And so that is likely going to permanently go away. That has triggered really pandemonium of like overall what is going to happen and a lot of confusion about what you should do. For example, a lot of new grads will come out feeling like the only option for their student loan debt is Dave Ramsey, and they should pay them off as quickly as possible. Well, public service loan forgiveness or National Health Service repayment programs or other repayment programs are really viable options, but particularly PSLF being the most common has been what most people were aware of. And now there's kind of this fear that because of what's happened with the SAVE plan, PSLF maybe will, quote, go away. People aren't sure what repayment plan they should be on, or if PSLF is going to be removed from the table. So it's, again, like I don't have the final plan. Of course, it's changing all the time. I think there were, at least 6 changes just in the month of March. The landscape is constantly changing. So the thing I would say is if you have federal student loans, you really need to spend time and effort to be in the know on these things, to make sure you understand, okay, what is established through a statute, what would take an act of Congress to go away, like PSLF, for example, versus something that's built through a regulatory process. What can the president say, hey, I'm getting rid of? What, again, is not something that they have the authority to do that for? And then trying as much as you can to future forecast the best path. For example, you really should be staying in the loop on income or certification deadlines, and then getting really strategic of, if I am still pursuing PSLF, when do I file my taxes? Do I do an extension? Like those kinds of questions, they sound silly, but they actually save a lot of money or cost a lot of money in the long term if they're done wrong. And so I recognize it's work. I recognize it's stressful, but I think it's actually one of the most important things you can do. And kind of burying your head in the sand over it and just going, I'm going on a standard repayment plan. I'll just Dave Ramsey my loans. That might not be the best solution. So again, like I mentioned, our free club, we actually this week we're hosting an hour-long live event. The whole entire thing is a federal student loan update, walking through what's going on with the SAVE plan, what's going on with the PAVE plan, the difference between the IBR plan, old versus new borrower, is PSLF or PSLF safe or not safe, and then what is the latest in terms of income recertification and recommendations for employment recertification. So all of those like key things, again, I know it's probably not the way most new grads want to spend a Thursday night, but like this stuff will cost you $100,000 if you do it wrong. And so plugging yourself into a knowledge base for that is going to probably be the most important thing you can do as a new grad right now if you do have any federal student loans at all.
So Kristin, let me ask you, correct me if I'm wrong. From my memory, your first couple of years in practice, you put your nose down and just crushed out your student loan, correct?
I did, yeah.
With your financial knowledge that you have gained now, Is that the same course that you would have taken for you personally, or would you advise something else?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. I would not change a thing about it, but I am a person who that's against my core beliefs is to say, hey, I have this regret. I wish I would have done it differently. I just think that that served me in a lot of ways. But I I tell almost no one to do that, and here's why. When I did that, like I did it to an extreme. I paid off $161,000 in 16 months. I worked so much. I mean, I probably put in 80 hours a week the whole time, and my husband and I literally lived on $35,000 a year, which is very hard to do. And so even though I had an opportunity cost because I wasn't investing, it was 16 months. You can overcome that. What most people do is they say, hey, I'm going to take on an accelerated student loan payment plan. And the accelerated payment plan is accelerated. It's not 10 years, but realistically, it's more like 5 or 6. Like, unless you're wanting to be really crazy with how you approach your student loan debt, it's very rare to get that sub 24 months unless you just happen to be super fortunate and have a very low student loan balance. And so the opportunity cost obviously mounts year after year, and it becomes kind of insurmountable to make up the investing side. If all you want is a standard retirement and you say, hey, I'm comfortable working full time all the way up until, 65, 67, and you wait to start investing seriously until you're, 32 or 33, you can pull it off. You can pull it off investing 20% of your income. It'll have to be more, but you can pull it off. But what I see most commonly is people that take that approach and then they say, well, now, I started taking investing really seriously at 32 or 33 when I was done, but now I'm 40 and I had, I'm in a season of kids or whatever it is, and I really would like to have the flexibility to reduce hours. I maybe wish I would have hit what's called like coast fire or a milestone like that, where I had front loaded my investment portfolio and now I have the ability to take that lower paying job with no weekends, no holidays, no call, etc. And I don't have to worry so much about investing. But the math doesn't work because the front loading of the portfolio would have had to have happened during the 5 years that you spent all of your income on the student loans. And so it removes a lot of those options from the table. You have to be really careful as a result in choosing that path. But what's tricky is most people, when they're new to practice and they're making that decision, they don't understand the investing numbers. They don't understand the investing piece. So they make their whole money plan based just on student loan debt with very little understanding of opportunity cost or what they would even need to retire. And so then by the time they do learn those things, well, they've already kind of put themselves in a hallway and shut a lot of the doors. And now they only really have one or two open at the end of the hall, which is that's the hard part. So it's not that it's wrong, but you have to have a deep understanding of all of the rest of the money plan when you're choosing that. And most people don't.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point there and a great way to look at it. I I'm more along the lines of you. I kind of live like a pauper, as Mike Harvey would have told me to have done when I graduated school. And, luckily there was a loan forbearance in there. And so during that time, I put away a lot in order to secure a house to own instead of continue to rent. And then kind of turn my attention back to the student loans. So I think that's a good point of weighing what's the best option for you and making sure that, if you want to invest and see your money grow with the market, ideally, that you kind of have to weigh the student loan versus that.
Yeah, it's a hard decision to make, and the student loan piece is conceptually easier to understand, which is why I think, and there's a lot of psychological burden that comes with debt too. That tends to trump this. There's very little psychological burden associated with delaying investing. There's a huge objective cost, but there's very little psychological cost. And so when you have someone just kind of weighing the options, it tends to it tends to be deprioritized for that reason.
What about the emergency stash? What do you think about that? Having an account where it's just money if something happens, something breaks or you break something or whatever, and you got to have some cash. How much do you recommend people have on hand?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, you do have to have some cash. I really think for most medical professionals, you can get away with 3 months of expenses. There are some notable exceptions to that. If you have a single income household and many dependents, like for example, you work, you have a spouse and 4 kids, your spouse stays at home, you likely should lean closer to 6 months, given the fact that a single income loss would create pandemonium pretty quickly. Similar thing if you're in a field that has a lot of job instability. If you're a medical science liaison in pharma, they tend to have a lot of turnover. If you are someone who's doing locums and you're doing exclusively locums contracts, sometimes you'll have an unpredictable gap in between those contracts. Those kinds of circumstances might lead you more towards 6 months of expenses in cash, but the 3 months is probably okay for most. The tricky thing is most people actually don't know what their monthly expenses are. Unless you're someone who truly actually does some type of cash flow system, most people kind of look at, hey, what's my rent or mortgage? What's my car payment? And they add that up. I'll add in some money for groceries. That's probably pretty close. And they really underestimate what it actually takes for them to go through their cash outflow for the month. So before you decide a number, whether you're choosing 3 or 6 months, you should actually look at a genuine cash flow system for the last 90 days and see, what are my true median expenses, and use that number and avoid the guesstimation approach.
Listeners, tune in next week where we continue our discussion with Kristin Burton talking about finance and retirement and other strategies, how to manage your income. Please follow the Physician Assistants in Orthopedic Surgery on social media. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Please subscribe to our podcast. If this has been helpful, please take a moment to leave a review.